The early weigh-in podcast is back, and talk about a comeback, man, from the 2 previous weeks. We absolutely killed it last week. So before we get started, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel, and any comment below, about who's going to win and stuff this week, get you in the running for the awesome poster here behind us once we hit 100 subscribers. But just to touch on that killer week we had, man, I think 7.5 units positive, something like that. We had an awesome night.
Yeah, great way to bounce back, especially coming off of our biggest loss. We really needed it.
We did.
Starting off the night, we bet on the first fight, Joel Alvarez versus Alexander Yakovlev. Exactly how we thought it was going to happen. That first round sub, he almost blew it with that first attempt, but ended up getting that armbar later on in the first round, and he did exactly what we thought was going to happen.
We did, man. And at that price tag being like a minus 250, dropping to the minus 155, I don't know why, brother, but I love to play that, and we were both on board, cash big on that. We set out on that Miranda Maverick fight, but, man, she didn't look good early. She was taking some right hands from Jojua, who normally is not known for her striking, but once Maverick kind of got her shit together and got the fight filling out, she started going to work, and that elbow cut her bad.
100%. Just noting on it, if that wasn't a girls' fight, I don't think it would have been stopped. That cut was disgusting, but at the same time, I feel like the UFC kind of leans towards protecting the women over the men.
Yeah, it wasn't interfering much with the fight, not getting in the face or the eyes or anything.
Right,
so
right.
I didn't like the stoppage either.
Moving on, I think we even touched that it's hard to ever count out Sam Alvey, and look at him. He does it again. Yeah. He got the draw. Luckily, it didn't affect our parlay, which was our biggest concern, but damn, Sam Alvey he will stick around.
And I was super concerned going to the judges' scorecard because, man, dude, Sam Alvey really might have won those first 2 rounds.
And honestly, I don't think that third round was enough to justify a 10-8 like a lot of the judges had. So
I'll take it all day, but, sometimes the judging's not correct. Man, Shavkat Rakhmonov, the newcomer, we were talking about how much of a presence and size he brought to that welterweight division, and he locked up the guillotine and cowboy tapped quick.
Yeah, he really did. I know that we were almost on the fight doesn't go the distance at plus 117.
He didn't even get out of the first round.
It's another one of those that, if we didn't pull the trigger, and it stings just a little bit worse.
Yeah, it stings worse than losing one that you do.
Casey Kenny versus Nathaniel Wood. Both of the guys looked sharp, I'll say that. Yeah. And I do think that they made the right decision, although I could see it going to Nathaniel Wood. I think Kenny edged out 2 rounds, but,
Absolutely, man. That definitely deserving of the fight of the night that it took home. And like I had touched on how I didn't really like how they were matching them up this earlier in their career, 4-1 in the UFC. But I think both of them came away with positivity out of that fight. I think both of them are going to even get a better name. I don't think one of them take a step down after that fight. Mm-hmm. And then Tuivasa, man, our prop bet, 2 seconds left in the first round. I've never went so crazy in my life. But, man, he went out there with the game plan to beat Struve like everybody does. The leg kicks, put him against the fence, and land the overhand right. And I don't know what it was, man, but that was like a weak overhand right that kind of put Struve down.
Struve, he looks for the easy way out in his fights. And to be honest with you, I think that he's probably done with the UFC. And if he's not, he should be done with the UFC.
I agree with you.
Moving on, Magomed Ankalaev versus Ion Cutelaba. Magomed looked like a world beater and is a world beater in my opinion. Yeah. He will, I think we touched on it last week, he'll eventually touch gold.
I absolutely agree, man. He looked unstoppable. He's without a doubt going to touch gold in that light heavyweight division if Jones leaves that vacated. And man, Lauren Murphy took the newcomer out, inside the distance and talked a lot of shit in that post-fight speech, about how inactive some of these girls have been. She's on like a 5-fight win streak and stuff, man. You can almost say she deserves the next shot, but she at least deserves a #1 contender fight.
Totally agree. If it's her and Andrade to see who fights Shevchenko, wouldn't mind it at all. Mm-hmm. I think the biggest thing with Shakarova was just too small. She wasn't big enough to implement a wrestling heavy attack, and Lauren Murphy's one of the bigger girls at 125. Mm-hmm. Moving on, Phil Hawes versus Jacob Malkoun. Took 18 seconds for Phil Hawes to knock him out. In hindsight, I'm glad we didn't bet that fight because we honestly thought that Jacob Malkoun would put up a better fight than he did.
We had touched on Malkoun, definitely not deserving of a fight on the main card, but maybe not even deserving of a UFC. 18 seconds, you don't get to see too much of a fighter, but you can't back up and take the power of Phil Hawes like that, man.
Right.
And I just mentioned it before we started. I was so glad when I got the call from you that you were after the weigh-in saying we're betting the Volkov money line. Man, I loved that. I was all over Volkov. He is twice the striker of Walt Harris, and Walt Harris was checking that clock before the first round was even over with.
100%. Volkov, when he came in at 265, it's impossible to pass him up because I thought that might be the only advantage that Walt Harris was bringing in was weight, and he didn't even have that.
He looked so good, worked the body with those teep kicks so well. Flawless performance. And I know you're so excited about this.
Oh my gosh. So the lock of the night, Robert Whittaker showed why he is the former champ. I mean, he outclassed Jared Cannonier. It got a little choppy there at the end, but it's not a Robert Whittaker fight if it doesn't get a little choppy.
I feel you. And, I know Cannonier broke his arm, but I can sit back here in my chair and say whatever I want. Jared makes a living off the right hand, and he didn't even throw that either, man. And Whittaker went out there and landed the patented combo jab right head kick like 2 or 3 times, man. I don't know how Jared Cannonier laying face down was not put out of that fight at one point, but absolute lock of the night. Robert Whittaker is back, man.
Yeah, I'm excited for that. I think unless your name is Israel Adesanya, he's going to get the dub over you.
Absolutely. And then, man, main event of the evening was Khabib and Gaethje, and cashed into under 4.5 on that one. Easy money. I told you I was willing to pay the price tag all day at -170 for under 4.5 rounds. Khabib made him wilt underneath that pressure. Justin did worse than anybody that has fought Khabib.
Whoa, I don't know. He stole a round. Yeah, the first round he won on 2 judges' scorecards.
I know, but he wilted quicker than anybody has under that pressure.
100%. I think Khabib had it in his mind, hey, I don't want to take any more of these leg kicks, and he didn't waste any time to get the submission, where I think, he does like punishing his opponents a little bit, and I think that he could get that submission quicker in all of his previous fights than he did.
And, I don't know if I touched on it on the podcast or anything, and everybody was just so hyped about Justin Gaethje's wrestling and how that was going to be, such a equalizing factor. And when you see a fighter not use his wrestling throughout his whole career, it's for a reason, man. It's something that he's not comfortable relying on, and you don't show it your whole career, and then you're going to pull it out against Khabib. Good luck, man. And Khabib showed why he's 29-0.
And the lightweight GOAT.
The lightweight
goat.
The lightweight goat. And, it is nice to see him right out after losing his pops and stuff like that. It's nice to see him right out on top, because in MMA you don't really get storybook endings like that,
I totally agree. And just to top it off, 9 of those 12 fights were finishes, and I think we got spoiled.
We did get spoiled on Saturday, and man, I'm super hyped for this one as well. Another guy trying to make a storybook ending, and Anderson Silva coming back fighting Uriah Hall this Saturday, man. But I think we're more pumped for this co-main event. As you can tell, we got Thug Nasty, Bryce Mitchell taking a step up in competition, finally fighting Andre Touchy Fili. But man, I'm so excited for these fights from top to bottom, so let's get into them.
Yeah, so to start off the card, we've got Miles Chapo Johns, who's 10-1, facing Kevin Quicksand Natividad at 9-1. This is a bantamweight bout. So Miles Chapo Johns, he's coming off a loss to Mario Bautista. It's not a bad loss by any means. Bautista's only loss in his entire career is to Corey Sandhagen, who's the next title challenger after Aljamain. Miles John, he's fighting at bantamweight now, but he has wins at featherweight, and he's fought at catchweight multiple times at 140. So I do think that he's going to be the bigger man coming into this. He trains out of Fortis MMA, which will be a reoccurring theme over the course of this card. And, he does have a wrestling-heavy attack, but that doesn't mean that he isn't a problem on the feet as well. He has a right hand that can really sting you, and if you're not looking out for it, it can make you pay. On the other side, Kevin Natividad, yes, he is coming from LFA, but he's only fought tomato cans in LFA. Just a little recap of his last few fights. 10-5 was his last win, which was his biggest one. 7-7, 2-1, 8-7, and 3-2. Those aren't anything to write home about, and it's definitely not UFC talent, where we've seen Miles Johns get a couple of wins, even though some of them controversial, over UFC talent. Kevin, he said via Twitter that he had been in fight camp since March, so I expect him to come into this in incredible shape as well. And, one thing that I noticed whenever doing a little tape study on him is he is susceptible to an overhand right. He's a hittable opponent, and that's not necessarily a knock on him because he also hits people extremely hard, and that's how he's been getting most of his wins done. But I don't think that you're going to be able to take the overhand right from Johns, and he better be able to stuff the takedown. One thing that he's noted in his fights is that he knows that his opponents are going to look for leg kicks, and he's comfortable with taking them. I'm not saying that Miles Johns is, a leg kick specialist. He throws them pretty rarely, but that is something that I would hope that he'd try and implement in this game, even if it's just to win points on the judges' scorecard.
So I like Miles Johns in this one too, man. So one thing I did before this podcast, I watched a lot of interviews with some fighters and stuff, and one thing I wanted to see with Miles John is the headspace he was in after his first professional loss. And honestly, I'm not seeing one better. Miles John is ready for this fight, man. I talked about his gas tank, and with that wrestling-heavy approach, he tends to slow down come that third round, and he talked about that openly in the interview and talks about how still training at Fortis MMA, he's made a ton of changes with the strength and conditioning coach, and he really expects a new form of himself to come out in this fight. So really, I hope the same thing, but the only way I see Natividad winning is somehow he gets it done on the feet late in the fight, because I think Miles John is going to dominate this fight on the feet, on the mat. He's got, he's got a great jab, but you touched on the right hand. Not only is it heavy, but dude, it's fast. He has got unreal speed. He's got the speed of a flyweight. He really does, and a prospect that I'm really high on. You touched on both of their times at LFA, and you're right, man. The matchmaking for Miles Johns there at LFA groomed him much more for the UFC than that of Kevin Natividad there. Man, I wasn't as high on Miles Johns before breaking this fight down, but as I dug into it more, I really think he has way more tools in his toolbox. He's a way better fighter here, and around the minus 160, 170 range, I'm not afraid to pull the trigger on it.
Not at all. I think that this will be a podcast pick.
Moving on to the next fight, man, at women's flyweight, it's Cortney Casey, who's 9-8, fighting Priscilla Cachoeira, who's 9-3. And first thing I want to say, man, is it is probably the most unpolished record in MMA there at 9-8. But Cortney Casey has fought legit competition from top to bottom of that resume, and I think the UFC is really doing her a favor here for taking that the Roberson fight on short notice. Cortney Casey is a very, very well-rounded mixed martial artist. I think she has good striking. She's very good on the mat, and she's stronger than a whole lot of girls. She's a good athlete. She tends to get beat by girls who are able to out-grapple her. And I just don't think Priscilla is a girl that's going to be able to out-grapple Cortney Casey here. Priscilla Cachoeira, man, the UFC has not done her really any favors. Your debut was against a girl who's just absolutely clean. They made the women's flyweight division for Valentina. It was straight up designed for her. That was one of the most one-sided beatdowns I've ever seen in a women's MMA fight. Sad to watch. Man, just looking at the competition of these two, I think Priscilla Cachoeira has maybe the first round to get it done, but I don't even give her the first round. I think this is a gimme fight for Casey. I know she's at a minus 230, but even inside the distance or a parlay with Casey, I think it's worth a stab at, because I think she's just twice the better fighter here.
So I kind of disagree. I lean towards Cortney Casey getting the decision or getting the win, but I would never bet her. She has only legit losses in the UFC, and you touched on a few of those. But even in her wins, she's always found herself in a compromising position. She's been on her back in her win over Mara Barella, Angela Hill, and Jessica Aguilar, all three different years. So, it's no matter how much she improves her game, she still finds herself in compromising positions. And yeah, she's able to pull out those wins, but those are against smaller girls than Priscilla. Priscilla has wins at both featherweight and bantamweight, and coming down at flyweight, I think that she's going to have the physical presence in the octagon. Most of Priscilla's wins coming by KO, and her coming off of the win over Shayna Dobson with that insane knockout. I do think it speaks to Priscilla's power. And you touched on her best chance being in the first round. You're 100% right. But I think that chance is pretty good. I kind of look at this fight as a little bit of a trap fight. Cortney Casey, she is the better, well-rounded fighter. And, I think that she's polished. She really is. But Priscilla, I just don't want to test Cortney Casey's 9-8 record at a minus 200 or more against Priscilla, who's going to be the bigger fighter and is going to look to put that pressure on her. I don't think that we've gotten necessarily a good look of what Priscilla could do in the flyweight division strictly because of the level of competition that the UFC's put her up against.
I feel you, and we have gotten burned on some girl fights, so I like to stay away, man, but this is just one, I hate to say it's one of those where I think it's just an absolute gimme fight because we've seen, Agapova and many dogs just blow their wad, but I don't see Casey blowing her wad here. I probably see it going to decision. I'm way more comfortable with parlaying Casey in here, but I just don't see Priscilla being able to implement the grappling heavy attack it's going to take to beat Casey. But we can probably both agree it's going to go Casey's way on Saturday.
I think it'll go Casey's way. Just girl fight. All we need to say. So moving on, Dustin Jacolby, who's 12-5, who's making his second UFC appearance versus Justin El Blanco Ledit. This is one I'm actually really excited about. So this is Dustin Jacolby. He's the former middleweight champion in... a former middleweight champion, maybe in Bellator. I forget which organization it is, but he's a former middleweight champion. And, he's fighting at light heavyweight now. His last fight against Cody East being at heavyweight. Mm-hmm. So it's nothing new to him jumping up in these weight classes. But I do think that Justin Ledit is his best competition that he's faced. Justin Ledit is 3-0 at heavyweight. Now he's 0-3 at light heavyweight, but look at some of the guys that he was facing. First one, Alexander Rakic, who's about to be a title challenger. Johnny Walker, who in the first round, I'd be nervous of anybody fighting Johnny Walker.
He was the hottest prospect in 2019 when he put Ledit out.
Right, and how do you train for somebody who throws spinning back fists in the opening seconds of the round and is one of the more athletic fighters in the division? Then his loss to Alexa Kamer, and that's the one where everybody's kind of writing off Justin Ledit. And realistically, I think that that's only because of Kamer's performance against William Knight in his last time out. William Knight is not somebody you want to get into a clinch battle with, and Kamer was undefeated coming into that fight. If he would have gotten through William Knight, I think we would be looking at this fight, at this loss on Justin Ledit's record, just like we are the other two. Justin Ledit, he's got a win over Ike Villanueva in 2012. I think that's somewhat noteworthy. He subbed him, and that was one of his 5 submission wins that he has on his record. He has a really long reach at 6'4" and 80 inches. He hides behind a jab, and he's able to pop it out really, really well. I also think that he has a great mental game whenever he's in the octagon. He doesn't shake at all. And, you really got to see that in the fights that he was winning, like the Chase Sherman fight or the Mark Godbeer fight. It's just, he does have he is cerebral in the cage, and it shows. He can listen to his coaches. He could take advice and adjust accordingly whenever he's in there. Something that's a kind of a knock on Justin Ledit, especially in the Alexa Kamer fight, is he has a low output, and that's cost him in fights in the past. And hopefully he's addressed that and knows to not come into a fight against Dustin Jacolby, who is a primarily kickboxer. He fought in Glory and has a bunch of good names that he's fought on his record. Most of those big names, though, are losses. I think that he's almost a middle-tier kickboxer. I don't know what his record is, but I can't imagine it being overwhelmingly high. He's coming off, like I said, this is his second time in the UFC. His first time he went 0-2, and I think that was in 2012. He's coming off the win on the Contender Series against Ty Flores, who was the minus 300 going into that fight. And, hindsight's 20/20, but I think that was ridiculous.
Plus 300, right?
No, Flores was the minus 300.
Favorite?
Going into that fight.
World?
Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure. Yeah. So they had Flores supposed to win it, and then Jacolby is able to stuff the takedowns early, which was Flores' only path to victory. And something to note is Flores spent the majority of his career at welterweight and middleweight, so he was undersized. You could tell even in his body, he just looked soft in there. And so, it's not that impressive to me. Jacolby, he hasn't made like overwhelming improvements from his first time in the UFC to make me think that he should be anywhere close to a minus 300 favorite right now. And I think that's why he originally opened at a minus 170, and we've seen a line shift of over 100 points. I think a lot of money came in on him, but realistically, I think the value's at Justin Ledit sitting at a plus 280 right now.
So I could see value definitely being in Justin Ledit, but me personally, I think the kickboxing pedigree of Dustin Jacolby is going to come into big play here. I find it very, very hard to believe that Justin Ledit is going to come out here and give a guy who's been kickboxing for the past 10 years trouble on the feet. Whether it's losses to big name guys in the kickboxing, it's the experience. I think Justin Ledit's best path is to come out here and use his cardio advantage, use his athleticism advantage. He was a Div 2 basketball player, man. This guy's a legit athlete, so I think he has the cardio, the speed advantage, just the athleticism. Being they're both 32, I think Jacolby shows that age more than Justin Ledit does. I think Justin Ledit really could have success clinching up and really using a grappling heavy attack, because we saw Dustin Jacolby not be able to put Ty Flores away and start to kind of slow down, especially in that third round. And something I'm worried about in this fight, if Justin Ledit is able to withstand the pressure for the first 2 rounds. We talked about who Ledit's been fighting, man. It's legit prospects, and I almost think this is another one of those cases where they're giving him to a guy not as hot of a prospect, but a guy they want to win, and I'm not comfortable with the minus 310 price tag unless it's in some type of parlay, but when you get up to light heavyweight and stuff, man, anything can happen. But you touch on the second streak in the UFC here. Did not go his way the first time, but he was signed in his 6th pro fight to the UFC, so a bit premature. And the same for Justin Ledit, man, signed at 6-0, kind of premature. He started off 3-0, but not really against competition. And then they gave him the step up. Some of these guys prospects, and it's not really gone his way. This really. Man, it really has potential to go both ways. I just see the striking pedigree of Jacolby maybe shining in this. He's got a great body kick. The dude's got a great, his left jab. It's not just a pawing jab. He steps into it. It does damage, man. And he's got a great body kick. He uses the elbows. It's all evidence of his time spent in kickboxing. And in a light heavyweight fight, unless Justin Ledit can get this to the mat, I just don't see how a guy at a 9-3 record is going to out kickbox a guy who has had the pedigree level of it.
So, you talked about his kickboxing pedigree, 37 pro fights on his resume, so by far the more experienced guy coming into this. That being said, he usually fights at middleweight. I think that he's gotten really comfortable being the bigger guy in all of his fights. He's 6'4" with a 76-inch reach, and Justin Ledit matches his height with a 4-inch reach advantage. That's something that I think will will be a factor in this fight. I think that Jacolby, in theory, he should outstrike Ledit, but Ledit, if he starts to, land his jab and his lead left hook, he's a killer striker himself. And like you said, if he can get it to the ground, that's also where I see him having the advantage. So I really do think that the lines, they were right whenever they opened, with Jacolby being a minus 170 and Ledit a plus 145. But at this point, almost 3-1 dog on Ledit. Man, I think we're in the business of making money, and I really do think that the value's on that side. But it could be one where we just pass on it.
Yeah, and so I'm leaning more toward the pass side. I don't know. Jacolby, I'll be the first to say that jumping weight classes, especially later on in your career, usually not successful. But Jacolby almost, for me, is one of those guys that just wants to fight. Doesn't care if it's at middleweight or, light heavyweight. We liked it. We talked about it last week. Jacolby's been in multiple kickboxing bouts where he's fought 3 and 4 times the same night and stuff. So he's a
kind of like James Krause.
Yeah, he's a fighter's fighter, man. He's gonna bring it. But it is a sketch fight because if Jacolby does have the same output that he brings from that Contender Series fight and can't put Ledit away, it will get very interesting late because Ledit is much better than Ty Flores is.
Yeah, 100%.
And moving on, man, to, in my opinion, I took 5 minutes of tape study and put a big X through this fight. I'm just going to tell you that. Both of these guys, they don't really impress me too much. I think they both have a really decent chance of winning, and I think it was good matchmaking like the UFC, like we talked about. Both of these guys have taken some short notice fights for the UFC on a couple days' notice that really haven't gone their way. But the more talented of the two, man, I really do think is Jason Witt. He trains with James Krause. He puts his game together way more. Neither one of these guys carry the 170 weight very well. It's almost like looking in the mirror when you look at these two guys, in my opinion. They both keep their hands so low. They're both open, susceptible to the same attacks. You know, Jason Witt has gotten caught with multiple. He's got a chin. Granted, he's been put out 6 times, but he does have a chin, man, and he's taken. I watched a fight where he took like 4 head kicks, man. He keeps that right hand so low. But Cole Williams is not the guy that's going to go up there and throw a head kick. Cole Williams is, let me throw my overhand right, but he's got a real sneaky right uppercut as well that he really likes to throw. I think it was his fight before coming into the UFC. He was losing that bad until he happened to just land one good uppercut, left hook, and it really changed the entire fight. Not high on Cole Williams. I know he'll have a little bit of a size advantage here. I expect him to gas much quicker than Jason Witt. I think Jason Witt's just a little bit better fighter, trains in a better gym, has better people around him. He's not taking on a day notice, having to fly, getting bumped up to the main card because your medicals don't come back in time. I think we see him more prepared, a little bit better Jason Witt, and at like a minus 135, 145. I don't mind laying a unit there. So
no, I don't either. I think, Cole Williams, you kind of touched on both these guys. Let me start off. They're getting rewarded for taking that short notice debut.
Absolutely.
And it really is. I think one of the two is going to be kept in the UFC. One of them's getting the boot. Now, Cole Williams, he's fought a lot of tomato cans. And before his fight against Claudio Silva, his last 5 opponents' combined record was 28-32. Yeah. And I don't think that speaks much to his record at 11-2. That can be a little deceiving. He has fought at middleweight, so I do think that he'll be the bigger guy coming into this. That being said, Jason Witt, he's fought the much better competition, some of it in LFA, which I know you're really fond of. And you're right, he trains at Glory Kickboxing, so he's got people like James Krause, who he's working with on a daily basis. That's only going to make him better. And, whenever I was searching on his Instagram, he looks like he's in very good shape right now. Like some of the best shape that I've seen him in. And that may only further, helped me make the decision to want to play him straight as well. So I do think a unit on him at minus 130 to minus 140, I feel comfortable playing that.
One thing I didn't touch on Cole Williams that I really, really meant to, watching tape study on him, this guy covers up and is comfortable just covering up, taking a couple steps back, and letting people throw combos at him. And, I mean, you're at a welterweight division, man. You really can't take some of those shots. And Jason Witt has some power, man, in his hands. And there's just tendencies I saw in Cole Williams that I really didn't like. He will be the bigger guy, but he's also a little older. He's been on a year layoff compared to Jason Witt being a little bit more active. I think he's just going to be a little faster in there at welterweight. His hands are going to land when they want to. I haven't looked at the odds of under 2.5 or not going the distance, but I almost just want to stay away from it. But I think Jason Witt's the better fighter, and at the price tag he's at right now, I can't help but play him.
Yeah, I can agree. Okay, so now we move on to Sean Tarzan Strickland at middleweight versus Jack the Hammer Marshman. Sean Strickland, I'll go ahead and say I think he's the better fighter. He is somewhat one-dimensional, but we can say the exact same thing for Jack Marshman.
Without a doubt.
Sean Strickland, he fights very tall, he doesn't kick very much, and he throws really long, straight punches and has a lot of forward pressure. And those are all the things that he does well. I think that if this was Sean Strickland versus a legit wrestler, I'd have a completely different opinion about him. But against Jack Marshman, I think that he's going to be able to implement the game plan that he wants to. Looking at his last fight against Nordine Talib, he outstruck the dude, and I think
right hand is something dangerous
for sure. I think, and I have a pretty high. Not expectations, but I'm pretty high on Nordine Talib. Although he is getting on into his later years, I do think that Nordine Talib was an excellent test, and someone that really shows where Sean Strickland fits into this division. Strickland is the former King of the Cage middleweight champ, so he does have some legit experience. And the only unknown coming into this fight that I'm not very high on is that this is his first time having a 2-year layoff. That being said, he's under 30 years old, and we've seen how taking 2 years off has, been beneficial for guys in the UFC, especially if they're continuing to work during that 2-year layoff. Where Jack the Hammer Marshman, I know we both talked about it before, but he's John Phillips made over. Yes, both of them Welsh. They're the same. They're the same fighter. They like to stand up. They don't have really good wrestling defense. You see it in their losses. UFC losses, Marshman has 2 by rear naked choke. And his wins, one of them coming by TKO, one of them to Ryan James in December of 2017, where he came in as the minus 575, so he should have done that. And then his win over John Phillips, I can't believe that the UFC would do that to him and match him up. But I do think that speaks volumes that they went to a split decision with each other. I do think that Marshman brings more power than Strickland. For sure. Although I do think he's a little bit slower than Strickland. And I think that we're going to see that in the cage. This one, the fight not going to decision at plus 100, I really like. But that's just because both these guys are looking to throw. And I don't really want to bank on the guy coming off of a 2-year layoff. Or bank against the guy who's going to be able to implement his game plan, and really the only way he's going to win. Both the guys are stand-up strikers, and it's a puncher's chance for either of them. And at middleweight, I like it. So I like it as well, man. And even money, not going the distance is something I like. And technicality and weapon-wise, man, to a T, man. Sean Strickland's right hand, it's really something to be it's super dangerous, brother. And Jack Marshman really needs to worry about. You talked about how long it is. That covers space quick, man. And the Nordine Talib fight is something I have down here too, because Talib is a well-accomplished striker, and to go out there and to land as many right hands as Strickland did in that fight, it was almost crazy. So for me to think Jack Marshman's going to outstrike him, I just don't think so. And Marshman, he's also coming off of a year layoff, and he's taking it on short notice. So even though Strickland's coming off of a 2-year layoff, I got to think he's more prepared. Now, I don't know how much work Sean Strickland has gotten in the 2 years, because this is something I didn't know. He had a motorcycle wreck, and that's why he's been out for 2 years. So, I'm sure the injury probably healed pretty quick, and he's been back to work, in the gym and stuff. But you're not going to take a fight too short after a motorcycle wreck. Right. So I like to think that strides have been made. This guy is 7-3 in the UFC with losses to Ponzinibbio, Kamaru Usman, and Zaleski dos Santos. All 3 which would murder Jack Marshman. Yes. I mean, Sean Strickland is twice the fighter here. He's supposed to be matched up against Wellington Turman, who I might have taken Sean Strickland against after Turman just got his lights shut out a couple months ago. I think Strickland can take this to the mat and abuse Marshman. I think he's the better fighter everywhere. Marshman's 3-4 in the UFC, and he's just that guy that they say, you need to win, here you go. Let's bump up Antonio Carlos Jr., let's make Edmund look good, let's make Thiago Santos look good, here you go. And I think this is another case where Sean Strickland is 7-3 in the UFC. He's got the talent, but he's got that question mark with the layoff, so here's an easy opponent for you that we think you're going to have success against. Strickland's so much faster than him, and across the octagon from him, you got Jack Marshman. I mean, He lets the opponents take the center of the cage every time. He puts his back on the cage. He's a super low volume, relies on the power. I can't even find a way that Jack Marshman wins this fight. As long as we're taking a dump on Jack Marshman, I did do a little creeping on his Facebook page, and he doesn't look to be in incredible shape by any means. You talked about him taking this fight on short notice. Yeah. You can tell.
Good. So, I don't mind this fight not going the distance, and I'm all right with Strickland parlay somewhere as well.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind that either.
Moving on, man, it's a fight that I'm super stoked for. I think we have a very good prospect here. It's in the bantamweight division. We have Adrian Yanez, who's 11-3, fighting Victor Rodriguez, who's 7-2, with a little soft spot in our heart because he's a big avid fisherman, you know, so you'll touch on that. Adrian Yanez, man, at just 26 years old, he's got 3 losses on the record. 2 of those 3 are now in the UFC, one of them being Miles Johns that we touched on. This guy's riding a 4-fight win streak in LFA. It's he's got much better competition on that resume than his opponents standing across the octagon for him. Victor Rodriguez, he's fought absolute tomato cans over in Alaskan FC. I noticed an 8-1 on there in the last one. Creeped into that a little more, and that guy's got worse guys than Victor does on the resume. I don't want to sleep on Victor and just knock him because the guy's got pretty decent wrestling. I really will have to say, and I think that's the only way he's going to win this fight is somehow holding Yanez on the ground, because Yanez, man, he is an absolute terror on the feet. He's got amazing striking. He's got a stinging right hand that really worries people, but man, that left hook that follows is his weapon. He loves that left hook to the body, to the head. He's a great boxer, and I just think there's no way Adrian Yanez loses this fight. At a 330, the price tag's, unless you're parlaying, it's way too high to play. But Yanez inside the distance at minus 145 or even the TKO at plus money is, man, I think it's a lock.
Mm-hmm. I couldn't agree more. You know, Adrian Yanez, even on his Contender Series debut, he got comparisons to Jorge Masvidal. He looks like him, he fights like him, and I see why there are comparisons to him. He's got a crisp boxing style attack and great timing. He's constantly looking for the KO, and you know, you touched on it, that Yanez by TKO at plus 145, that's where the money is right there, in my opinion. Now, Victor Rodriguez, yeah, you know, it's hard to bet against him because he is an avid fisherman in Alaska. I creeped on his Instagram, and he's got some incredible photos of him with some big-ass salmon. And,
nice.
You know, me and you both being fishermen, we love that. But at the same time, he's no Gregor Gillespie, so we can't even bank on him as a fighter. I think that, you know, all 7 of his wins by KO. You touched on his opponent's records, and his last opponent being 8-1. It kind of skews this stat, but his last 4 opponents' combined record is 11-6. That sounds like one person's record, you know? So, realistically, Rodriguez, he is knocking out those 4 opponents, and he should be knocking out those 4 opponents. He took 4 years off after his last loss in 2014, and since then, he looks great. But once again, who does he look great against? I think that this is definitely his biggest test, and he is lucky to be getting called up at the time that he is. Let's say he does beat Yanez. Good for him, but I don't see it happening. He does look to throw bombs with everything that he uses, whether it's kicks or punches. He is going 100%. That being said, at the bantamweight division, he's not exceptionally fast for the amount of power that he brings. So I think Yanez is going to have the ability to keep it standing on the feet and touch him up. And I do see this getting done inside the distance.
So I can't help but take my time to just kind of bash on Alaskan FC, man, because we've seen a ton of, you know, fighters just have, you know, just give me opponents, and when they get to the UFC or when they get to the Contender Series, and you know, in Jordan Wright, it does not end pretty, and then changes have to be made. And at 28 years old, I like to think this guy stays ready, but not having the best of fighting experience. I don't know how much Alaskan FC has been fighting this year. Don't know what kind of shape he's going to come in. And Yanez being the hot prospect he is, and just coming off the Contender Series, I really expect him to be in phenomenal shape and an easy fight for him here.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think that Yanez might be one that we parlay with Strickland or somebody else. That's a heavy favorite. So moving on, we go to the lightweight division with Chris Gruetzmacher at 14-3 versus Alexander the Great Hernandez at 11-3. Now, Chris Gruetzmacher, he's coming off of his win against Joe Lauzon in 2018. This is a 2.5-year layoff right now, and one that I expect to show, especially somebody being 34 years old in the lightweight division. Those years start to add up right after 30, you know? They really do. And, man, maybe the biggest, like, glaring problem on Gruetzmacher's record is his TKO loss to the GOAT, Artem Lobov. And I really do think that just speaks volume to his to his susceptibility to punches.
Yeah.
You know, he eats shots, and he's even quoted saying that he has a lot of faith in his chin. Well, you know, I don't think that that's a game plan that's going to get you very far in the UFC. And against somebody like Alexander Hernandez, who came into the UFC with a lot of hype surrounding him, and since it's kind of evened out, he's still at 28 years old, is only getting better, and throws some bombs, way more bombs than Artem Lobov. Right. I can tell you that. I expect Alexander Hernandez to try and right off the bat use a wrestling style attack to get it to the ground. Now, that being said, Hernandez has had problems in the past with his gas tank. So if he's not able to get it to the ground, hopefully he's addressed those problems and maybe even lost a little bit of muscle just so he can continue that pace throughout 3 rounds. Hernandez, he has a solid front kick and body kick, and I expect him to use that to try and slow Chris down over the course of the fight. I will say that even though he's coming off of his loss to Drew Dober is one of those guys who right now is putting together an impressive win streak and really making an impact on the lightweight division. So I don't put much. I'm not like discrediting him for that loss by any means. And even though he did lose it, he was able to complete takedowns on Drew Dober in both round 1 and 2, even when he was hurt. So he does have a fight IQ to where he can go back to that wrestling if something isn't going his way. And I think that speaks to his ability at 28 years old to have a pretty high fight IQ. Just got to worry about that gas tank. And I know that we got a couple of decent prop bets going into this one. I'll let you touch on that.
Man. And if I'm correct, this is the prelim main event, is it not? Given the great Alex Hernandez a nice little spotlight here for him. You know, it might not be on the main card, but a lot of eyes are going to be watching for the prelim main event there, and they're giving him a guy that this is the gimme fight of the night, in my opinion. Here, this is when you come in and make the splash, Alex Hernandez against Beneil Dariush. It is only tough fights from there. And he really started to get cocky, confident, thinking he was the shit. And
kind of made an ass out of himself.
And it started to show. And, when you get that step up in competition with Cerrone and Drew Dober, he wasn't ready for it, man. And part of that has to do with him being back home in the gym where he's the fighter, man. He doesn't have anybody there. And he's made the move to Factory X Muay Thai where he's not the main guy anymore, man. He is in there with absolute killers. And in the interview with him, man, people seem to love him down there. They really do. They said he's not the cocky asshole. He comes in there, he works hard, and he's been a good addition to those people there at Factory Muay Thai. I've always said, Hernandez is not the biggest lightweight. I almost feel like he could move down to featherweight, but he's going to be bigger than Gruetzmacher out there by quite a bit. Hernandez he carries a lot of muscle, and man, we touched on the 2-year layoff, and he had a torn ACL. So at 34, torn ACL, the layoff. This is handed up on a silver platter to Alexander Hernandez. His striking is just way better, and he's tough as shit, man. It took quite a bit for Cerrone and Drew Dober to get him out of there, and I just don't see Chris Gruetzmacher bringing that amount of force, pressure, Drew Dober and Cerrone are miles above Chris Gruetzmacher. It's you can't even compare it.
And then to touch on Chris Gruetzmacher's losses, his losses, although Chad Skelly's my boy, I really do like him. Chad Skelly and Davi Ramos, I think both of those guys are less of a fighter than Alexander Hernandez, and those are just 2 more people that had to Gruetzmacher's losing record.
Right, and so I know we had talked about a couple props and stuff because $350 price tag, only worth value in a parlay. However, you can get inside the distance at plus 165. You can get a knockout at plus 500. And man,
submission at plus 350.
That's what I was about to say. A submission at plus 350. Like Chris Gruetzmacher has been taken down in sub twice, and you touched on Hernandez taking Drew Dober down. Like submission is not out of the question. And that's why I kind of went back to the inside the distance at plus 165 because there's still a ton of value. It's not plus 500, which is the way I probably think it gets done, but it's still plus money. Alexander Hernandez is coming out here to put on a show, in my opinion, and I think he gets Gruetzmacher out of there before sees the decisions.
I totally agree, man.
Cool. to kick off the main card, we have Bobby Greene, who's 27-10, fighting Thiago Moises, who's 13-4. It's an interesting fight for me, man. You got Bobby Greene making the fourth walk of 2020, victorious in his previous three, and in my opinion, Bobby Greene's never looked better than he has right now. 34 years old, maybe getting up there in the age, but man, he really looks better than ever. He's getting that mic when he's done. He's saying what he wants. I feel like he's just in that groove right now, and it's going to take the top-level competition that he used to fight, like the Poiriers, the Edsons, the Drakkar Closes, or people like that, in order to take that streak away from him right now. Greene invites people, with the hands-down style to really brawl. It kind of lures people into that style even when they don't want to get into it. He puts on like a ton of exciting fights. I feel like him and Lando should just be mandatory. They fight once a year. It's such an exciting fight. It's his fight to lose, in my opinion, to be honest with you. I feel like the hands-down style is going to help defend the takedowns if Moises were to shoot. And Bobby Greene has been to decision in his last 8 fights. You've got Moises, who's never been finished, and Bobby Greene by decision is minus 145. So if I can't talk you into it, I'm probably still going to lay a little bit on that myself, because I think there's a ton of value in that after seeing him go to decision so many times. But I think we come to agreement that there is a pretty nice little way to play this fight. On the other side, standing across the octagon, you have Thiago Moises, who's coming off the heel hook finish of Michael Johnson, which, I don't know how he got out of the first round, to be honest with you. He was getting the brake beat off of him, and I know I've touched on him before when I cover Michael Johnson. That fight, if I was Michael Johnson, I would never have the same coaches again. He got taken down right in front of his coaches. His legs were getting attacked, and his coaches were silent. They weren't giving him any instruction. It pissed me off as somebody to watch that happen. But when Moises wanted it, he shot the takedown, grabbed a limb, and yanked on it. He really did show his level of BJJ and how much better he was. On the feet, he's got a real boxing-heavy attack, and he just doesn't have the skills to go out there and outbox Bobby Greene over 15 minutes. If he can't get that takedown, he does get a little lost on the feet, and people's hands start to land on him a little bit. I'd looked at maybe hedging the Greene decision with like a sub on Moises, since it would be plus money, but you'll touch on the way how I think we're going to play this fight.
Yeah, so, Bobby Greene at 34 years old really revamped his career. He has won his last 3, and the 2 that he lost right before that, both of those were controversial decision losses.
Yeah, he's been on the receiving end of plenty of split decisions.
Realistically, he could be 5-0 right now in his last 5. Now, you touched on Bobby Greene. He hasn't won by anything other than decision since 2013. So you're right. I don't see it changing necessarily with Thiago Moises, but again, it's just one of those things where if we're not getting plus odds calling a decision victory for a guy, I just don't feel comfortable banking on somebody going 3 rounds. Mm-hmm. And to touch on the angle that I think that is our best shot on this is we're going to take Thiago Moises and then scorecards, no action. Meaning if Thiago Moises doesn't win inside the distance and it does go to decision, it'll just be a nullified bet. And that's sitting at plus 125, and I think that's where the value is right there. Because realistically, Bobby Greene opened at a 280 or opened at a minus 170, and it's now a 280. Mm-hmm. And I just think that the value's long gone, where Moises opened at a plus 145, and I don't feel comfortable betting on him at a plus 250, but I do feel comfortable betting on him inside the distance. And if Bobby Greene does win by decision like we think he will, it just nullifies it. So you talked about Bobby Greene, his hands being low. He just invites those people and he looks to counter him. And I think in the lightweight division, he matches anybody for the most speed at 155. Where Moises, he's a IBJJF gold medalist, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu specialist. He is a monster. And I think that a real good fight, you touched on the Michael Johnson fight. It's a great comparison, Michael Johnson to Bobby Greene. And Thiago Moises did have problems with the speed of Michael Johnson, which I can only imagine Bobby Greene being able to have similar speed. Now, one thing that Thiago Moises has is a win over Jamal Emmers, who trains with Bobby Greene, and he beat Jamal Emmers in 2016. I think that Thiago Moises at 25 years old, he's got a ceiling that he still hasn't reached, and I can only see him improving. So just the age difference and everything else, I think the angle that we talked about's the best way to go at it. One thing as well, I think that Moises might come in as the somewhat smaller guy, which we don't see a lot with Bobby Greene. He's really thin, but Thiago Moises, he's fought at featherweight before, right. So he might not have the advantage as far as strength on the ground like he sometimes depends on, especially being a BJJ specialist.
So you lean toward Bobby Greene to get that one done?
I'm going to say Bobby Greene. I'm going to say Bobby Greene. But like I said, the play, Moises scorecards, no action.
I think that's where the money's at.
Yeah. Moving on, we have two heavyweights. Maurice, the crochet boss, Greene. I actually like that nickname. At 9-4, who is coming against the Prince of War, Greg Hardy, who is 6-2. So Maurice Greene, he's coming off the third round submission of Jan Vellante. That fight was suspect as ever. Jan Vellante was moving up. He was overweight.
Right off the couch.
Yeah, he did not look good by any means, and he still almost put Maurice Greene out. In the first round, he landed a good kick to the stomach, and that's something that I have noted here is that Maurice Greene, he's soft, especially for 6'7" in the heavyweight division. He's a little soft, and I think, as soon as Jan Vellante was able to land that front kick, you saw his whole demeanor change, and he started to shell up and just put up his guard, and Jan Vellante started to have success breaking through that guard with his strikes. Something that Maurice Greene has done recently is switch to a Jackson Winklejohn, and you can kind of see it right off the bat. One thing that I'll note is I think Maurice Greene will have success in the first minute and 30 seconds until Greg Hardy lands his first power punch. Maurice Greene, he's really good at using his kicks to keep distance, and you can really tell that he's training at Jackson Wink because he has the same style kicks as John Jones or Holly Holm would use to keep distance and keep it where the fight wants. That being said, we're talking about him trying to keep distance against an elite level athlete who comes in at 265 and throws bombs, I think Greg Hardy, he's extremely fast for his size. He's training at ATT at Coconut Creek, and I really do think that he's only improving. And at 6-2 and 32 years old, he's coming into the prime, especially at the heavyweight division. That's not old by any means. Right. He does have a long jab and some mean low kicks, and I think that he's going to look to start those off right off the bat. I could really see him hurting Maurice Greene early and Maurice just kind of shelling up and Hardy taking over. Now Hardy opened at a -205 and is currently sitting at a -300. I think you can touch on it later, but we do have an angle for this fight.
Absolutely, man. And Hardy is an absolute freak of an athlete. Should have been fighting his whole life, man. The potential this guy has at such 6-2 record there, it's got a ton of untapped potential that he still has, yet to tap into. Mm-hmm. I think the ceiling is very, very high for this guy. He has speed and power. It's really unmatched in that heavyweight division, maybe outside of like Walt Harris. Mm-hmm. It's a level of athleticism that a lot of heavyweights just don't have. And you had touched on 32. That's not not old for a heavyweight. And not only that, but man, he hasn't had the chin checked by a bunch of heavyweights his whole life either. So he's never been knocked out. This guy took his 6th professional fight against Alexander Volkov. And we saw what he just did to Walt Harris. And Greg Hardy takes him to a decision and, lands his fair share of punches. And I'm almost positive that that's the fight Greg Hardy broke his arm in like the first round and still was able to fight. I think there's just a ton of success there for Greg Hardy if he can get the right coach and right team around him. You touched on the leg kicks, brother. I have that written down with about 8 exclamation points. I think this is exactly where he needs to shine. I think Maurice Greene is more susceptible to him than Anderson Silva is. Mm-hmm. He's got a long range, and he does not use it very well, man. He uses the push kicks very well, but with the 82-inch reach, it's not used very well. He relies on the tall man defense sometimes. And
that's something he's not getting with Greg Hardy.
And that's something, he cannot afford to make any of those mistakes against Greg Hardy. Both of these guys, we can't really say have the best gas tank, but we've seen Greg Hardy go to decisions in his last 3 fights. But I don't necessarily know if this one goes to decision. Greg Hardy, a TKO at -125. That's money. And I mean, man, if that doesn't hit at a +335, little sprinkle by decision, you might be able to make your money back or something if he's gone to decision the last couple times. We've seen a real patient Greg Hardy, but I also think we've seen an opponent across the ring who's a little bit tougher, can take a little bit more than Maurice Greene can. And in my opinion, Maurice Greene sometimes just looks for a way out. You know?
He doesn't like getting hit. Yeah. He really doesn't.
So I think we're pretty sold on Greg Hardy there. I think there's value almost in any way you look at that, whether it's a TKO, inside the distance, parlay, decision. I'm all over Greg Hardy. I think there's a ton of ways that he can win that fight.
Even though banking on Greg Hardy is never a guarantee because he'll pull a inhaler out, he'll illegally kick somebody. Right. You know, he has messed up quite a few times.
But not in a co-main event spot here, so hopefully he doesn't mess it up this time. We're kicking back to middleweight, man, for Makhmud Muradov, who's 24-6, fighting Kevin Holland, who's 19-5, and man, both of us agree this is a banger of a fight on the card, man. Makhmud Muradov, 2-0 in the UFC, looked very good in those fights. Those guys not in the UFC anymore. And on the other side, you got Kevin Holland, who, I mean, taking debuts against Thiago Santos, making it really, really competitive the first round, talking shit the whole fight. I mean, the Joaquin Buckley knockout. Kevin Holland is a stud, man. Sometimes you don't know what Kevin Holland's going to show up. But I think the Kevin Holland that we've seen in 2020 is one that wants to fight. That's one that likes to stay in shape. Kevin Holland is good. I just don't think sometimes he wants to put in the work, to see the results. I think he sometimes relies on his length, his God-given talent and athleticism. Man, if somebody got a hold of this guy and really put him to work, Kevin Holland would be something special in the middleweight division. He's got an absolute killer frame. But he's got a guy that's not going to be giving up too much size standing across the octagon from him. He's endorsed by Floyd Money Mayweather, the money team. And, I think that's kind of got some money to come in on Muradov as of late. They opened at almost a pick'em, basically. Kevin Holland shot all the way up to a -170, and his sins came down this week to about a -145, 150 range. And I'm going to be honest with you, Mother. I was going to pay the 170 price tag for Kevin Holland. He's my boy. Maybe my emotions are getting the best of it, but I think he's a more established fighter. He's fought the better competition. He's not on a layoff. He's been on a roll. I'll take that money line at -145, 150 for Kevin Holland all day.
I don't mind that. I think a straight pick for Kevin Holland is something we could both agree on, especially if that line starts moving down and we can get a better price tag. I don't know if he opened at a -102. And Muradov opened at a -118. And realistically, I would be much more comfortable betting Kevin Holland if he gets somewhere around that -120 range. Yeah. That's where I think the honey hole is. And I think we talked about maybe holding off until the weigh-ins or the day before we place that bet. That being said, the fight doesn't go to decision as a +150 right now. And both these guys look for the finish, And I think that's something we should really consider, especially with them being middleweights, I always like betting a fight doesn't go to decision if it's guys 185 and above.
Right. Especially at plus money.
Right, dude. So Kevin Holland, one of the most active fighters I've ever seen. In the last 5 years, he has 24 fights, and that's nothing to take away from Muradov. He has 17 fights in the past 4 years. Both these guys active as ever. That being said, Muradov, he is coming off of a 1-year layoff, and that's mostly because he's had 3 canceled bouts this year alone. So, I'm sure that he's itching to get into the cage as well. But again, you kind of got to look at, is he entering a training camp, then backing out another training camp, and how does that look? It's hard to get motivated for a fight when every single fight that you get scheduled for gets canceled. Thankfully, we have somebody like Kevin Holland, who is the Cowboy Cerrone of middleweight and will take any fight anytime. Now, Kevin Holland, he has very long, hard strikes. He's very calm, even under a barrage of attacks from his opponents, and we saw that in the Joaquin Buckley fight. Joaquin would throw a combination 7-8 punch combo, and Kevin Holland will just smile through it in his guard.
Stuff that really gave Impa a ton of trouble.
Right. And, one other thing that I wasn't necessarily a fan of in Kevin Holland's last fight is he came in with those knee pads, and you could tell after a couple of leg kicks had landed for Darren Stewart that there was something wrong with his knees, and hopefully he's addressed that and given himself enough time off to where that's healed up. Now, Muradov, he is on a 13-fight win streak. His last loss coming in 2016 to David Ramirez, which he avenged 2 years later and came into that fight as a minus 530. So they understood that he made the changes that he needed to in that fight, or that fight was a fluke in 2016. Yeah. He's going to look to establish his jab early. He's very, very calm, just like Kevin Holland. It doesn't faze him being in the octagon. It looks like he's a veteran when he's in there, and maybe that's because he fights or is endorsed by Floyd Mayweather. They might have him in there with some killers, and he just has seen everything that Kevin Holland could throw. So, I'm not really sure. The more I talk about it, the less confident I get on Holland. But at the same time, Holland's our boy, so it's kind of hard to bet against him. I know it's my dad's favorite fighter, so, I want to bet for him,
I'm with you, man. And he's got a 6-inch reach advantage. So, it's going to... And Kevin Holland's just somebody that uses it pretty well for the most part as well. It's an exciting striking battle, man. Kevin Holland's no slouch, in the striking department. Makhmud, is gonna bring some serious striking skills to the table. But I'm curious to see how that black belt holds up on the mat if it gets there. I think Kevin Holland, I don't want to say he's going to go out there and dominate and he's going to, is that much of a better wrestler. But I think if it hits the mat, I think Kevin's much more talented jiu-jitsu-wise and could lock up a submission if it were to go there. I think Makhmud's most definitely going to try to keep this on the feet. But yeah, I got to lean with my boy Holland there.
I agree. So next one, our boy Bryce Thug Nasty Mitchell at featherweight fighting Andre Fili at 21-7. Bryce is undefeated at 13-0. That's not counting his loss on the Ultimate Fighter. Them fighting as frequently as they do in the Ultimate Fighter. I'm glad that they don't count that on the record. Bryce has one of the 2 twisters ever done in the UFC and tried to do it again in his last fight.
Multiple times.
Yes, had Charles Rosa in a twister position 1 step away from submitting him by a twister like 3 different times. He's Bryce, we can talk about his ground game all night. He's levels above most people in featherweight, but he does have a stand-up game as well. He has a good left high kick and a good left hook, and he's utilized that in a couple of his fights, especially the ones that he couldn't get to the ground right off the bat. Where Andre Fili, it's definitely the biggest test of Bryce Mitchell to date.
Absolutely.
Andre Fili's a 15-fight UFC veteran who's coming off a split decision win over Charles Jourdain of this year. Now, Andre Fili, he fights out of Team Alpha Male, who's been around for forever, and they've had repeated success. One thing to note is Andre Fili, he's only had 1 finish in his last 10 fights. He's not going out there and just going to murder Bryce Mitchell by any means. He also, Fili, he has, he's known for getting into some wars, and one thing that he also has is, we talked a little bit about Bryce Mitchell's stand-up game, but he also has a good right high kick that he can hide right behind some punches.
He does.
He'll finish off a combo just like, Robert Whittaker or Stephen Thompson.
I think he snapped him with it, man.
And it was, it was a punch, and then just went off to the side and hit him with the right high kick. It's tough to see coming, and it's something that I hope Bryce Mitchell's been looking out for in his lead up to this. Andre Fili, he's fought some of the best guys that featherweight has to offer. Yair Rodriguez, Max Holloway, Sadiq Youssef, Calvin Kattar. I mean, those are top-notch guys, and so you can't even fault him for the 7 losses that he has on his record. I hate to say it again, but it's the biggest test of Bryce Mitchell's career right now. And if he pulls this one out, man, I don't know what to think about Bryce Mitchell,
I'm with you, brother. So I love that you just kind of skip over that one at Ultimate Fighter. I get it. Katona is not in the UFC. He went down to bantamweight. They're fighting every couple days. And Katona went on to win the Ultimate Fighter. So It's like, do you knock him for it? I don't think so. The Rosa performance, the Schnell performance. I mean, it wasn't Schnell.
Matt Sales.
Sales, yeah. I mean, the performances were beautiful, man. They're flawless. He's an absolute beast on the mat. You know what Bryce's game plan is going to be. But when someone has a grappling heavy game plan like that, that's not one that you can technically really game for, in my opinion, because you're gaming the fight to not get to the mat. But what happens when Bryce gets you to the mat? You know, did he spend a whole bunch of training camp just defending the takedown? You know, did he say, all right, I need to learn to defend the takedown, so I'm not going to work on my striking this camp and come out with, you know, just loose striking that is not as technical as we usually see him with. You know, so when you have a really high grappler in front of you, it really, I think it changes your camp up a little bit. Makes you work on some skills and stuff that you technically maybe not put as much time as you need to in. Being said, he's out of Team Alpha Male, which is known to always have a good wrestling base and known to have an excellent guillotine, man, which is something that's what I think Bryce needs to watch out for the most, is when he's shooting, watch out getting the neck wrapped up. Now, you touched on the right head kick. Fili's got just a real kick-heavy attack as well, and I don't think that's something you want to throw at a wrestler. I think Bryce is going to have good success maybe catching one of those kicks. I think that's how this fight gets to the mat. I think the first time it does end up there. I think we see Bryce catch one of the kicks and take him down, and I honestly think Fili, I don't want to say he thinks he can beat Bryce on the mat, but he's decently comfortable on the mat, and he doesn't really hesitate to go there. And so I could see if Bryce wraps something up, him not really defending the takedown and maybe getting to the ground and trying to work a submission game. And I mean, Bryce is legit on the ground, you know?
He'll show you his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu
for sure.
skills.
And I mean, I can't bash Andre Fili, man. The 7 losses are absolutely as legit as they come. There's just one thing that you look through all those losses, there's not a wrestler on it, man. You know, it's Max, it's Cater, it's Jair Yusuf, it's
Michael Johnson.
Yeah, Shaman Maurice, Charles Jourdain, Miles Fury Jury. It's not wrestlers, man, and he's still only rocking like a 65% takedown defense or 69%, 70%. And it's like, that's not a guy who's, you know, none of those guys have ever came out and said, I'm going to take you down and show you what, you know, your weakness is and stuff. And that's what Bryce is going to do, man. That's our boy. Maybe I'm letting my emotion get the best of it, but I think Bryce is going to have a pretty easy time taking Andre down to the ground. He's long. He's got some long legs. I think Bryce can have just a field day with the double leg and stuff.
So this fight, it opened up as a -110 pick'em, and it's since leaned in towards the direction of Bryce Mitchell. He's now at a -142, but that's because of the hype behind him. Yeah. It's you know, he's got his camo shorts for this fight. Mm-hmm. He's putting out promo or advertisements for car dealerships, and they're just awesome. He's from Arkansas. He's got his groove right now, and it's hard not to get behind somebody like that. You know?
It is. But man, as an underdog, as the veteran he is, the better resume, the value is on Andre Fili there. But I am playing my boy straight up.
I couldn't care less.
That's right.
You're right. Maybe our judgment is clouded, but I don't even care. I will lose a unit or 2 units on Bryce Mitchell.
That's fucking right, man.
I don't care.
Moving on, man, to the main event of the evening. We have the number 9 middleweight Uriah Hall fighting the legend Anderson the Spider Silva, who's 34-10. Man, this is a big fight for Silva. You know, it's supposed to be his retirement, and I don't really think they did him a favor here either. You know, you can argue that this is a bad matchup for Anderson Silva, but at the same time, it's without a doubt a step down in competition from what Anderson Silva's been facing at the same time. And I texted you earlier, man, Hall cannot let this go to the judges. He cannot let this be a close fight whatsoever in Anderson Silva's last fight, because the judges will gift it to him, without a doubt. You got Uriah Hall here in the red corner coming out on a 2-fight win streak over Bavon Lewis and Antonio Carlos Jr. Both fights were, you know, kind of iffy, but he came out with the dub.
Right.
And both of those guys, I think, right now are better than the 46 or 45-year-old Anderson Silva. You know, Uriah Hall, man, a lot of people thought he was kind of the next Anderson Silva after he pulled that spinning kick on the Ultimate Fighter.
A ton of people drew comparisons between them.
And since then, he's 8-7 in the UFC. So his record is really nothing to write home about by no means. But he's made the move to Fortis MMA. And I said, did you check that Instagram? Because he's in the shape of his life right now. He really, the Fortis MMA, I feel like it's a modern MMA style. They teach you your grappling, they teach you your striking, and how to mix it in, where he was just like, I'm relying on my striking to get people out of here, and that's it. You know, we've seen him use some grappling, some clinch work, and really add some tools to the game. And man, he's got some of the best kicks in the game, and he better throw them at Anderson Silva's legs because they have caused him issues for years now, and we just saw Jared Cannonier give him some huge issues with it. Hall's been finished himself, and the last thing to go in the 45-year-old Anderson Silva is going to be the technicality and the strikes and the power. Silva's still going to have it. It's just going to be what can he take, and this is one of those things, and, I'm sure Hall might say it. It's one of those you fight till your idol becomes your rival, man. I'm sure Uriah Hall watched this guy fight for years and stuff, and is so happy to have the the opportunity to fight him here. But Silva should be on a 7-fight losing streak right here. They gave him the Brunson win. Shouldn't have given him that one. He's, I think since the Chris Weidman leg break, he's taken over like 2 stints of over 500 days off or something. It's just nothing in the making here. If you're going to bet on an underdog 45-year-old, you really got to have some reason to do that. And Anderson Silva hasn't shown me anything over the last decade, last 7 fights that proved me different, because Uriah Hall is no Forrest Griffin or Stephen Bonner or anything like that. It's a new level of game today, and I think Silva does not have a storybook ending on Saturday.
I couldn't agree more. You talked about Anderson Silva. Since losing his title to Chris Weidman, he's 1-6-1 in the UFC, and that one is controversial as hell. It's another one of those, don't go to decision with Anderson Silva or you will get
robbed.
You'll get robbed. And, before that Derek Brunson win, his last win was in 2012. I'm not going to bank on somebody's first legitimate win in almost a decade to be against Uriah Hall, who's had a resurgence in his career and has looked damn good.
Right.
It's tough to look good against Shoeface, who has over 10 minutes of control time whenever Uriah fought him. That being said, Uriah Hall was able to drop Antonio Carlos Jr. like 3 times in that fight, and really could have gotten the finish multiple times. One thing that I think we like is the inside the distance for Uriah Hall is a plus 170 right here. And I think that that's incredible value considering it's a 5-round fight. If it was a 3-round fight, Uriah Hall, I wouldn't want to bank on him because he is relatively known as a slow starter. But I think over the course of 5 rounds, I can't imagine Anderson Silva's 45-year-old body holding up to the amount of power Uriah Hall brings in his strikes. Whether it's that spinning back kick or the long combinations he's able to put together, I think he's going to be able to overwhelm an aging Silva. A fight that I look at is, some people might say, okay, well, Anderson Silva just went 3 rounds with Izzy, the current GOAT right now at middleweight. It's tough to say, but I think Izzy took it light on him. I think
what he just did to Costa and Whitaker.
I honestly think that Izzy was like, I'm not sure if I want to knock out my idol. I'm much more comfortable with just outpointing him, making it a chess match.
Bowing down at his feet when it's over with.
Right.
Absolutely.
He didn't have that killer mentality where I don't think Uriah Hall's...
He doesn't care, man.
He doesn't care. Yeah, he's looking out for himself, and at 36 years old, he needs to have a decisive win right now. And that being said, 5 of the last 6 wins that Uriah's had has been by finish. So I expect him to do the same thing here, and getting it at a plus price tag.
Almost 2-1. It's insane.
Yeah, it's insane. So we're definitely going to be playing that. All that being said, I want to give credit where credit's due. Anderson Silva is the middleweight GOAT. And I think that that's undisputed. He's the middleweight GOAT until Izzy has a few more title defenses. Because he's looking just as dominant as
Silva did. What Silva's reign is really something special. What he was doing to those guys that coming in to the UFC at like 32 years old and having so much success. It was something amazing to watch while it was happening.
100%. And something else I had written down is since Anderson Silva's debut in 2006, he's had 45 rounds in the UFC, matching his age. And it's not something where experience does him any good at this point. Every single year after the age of 40, I mean, you're only depleting in your reaction time, your power, your ability to take power shots, and it has finally caught up to Anderson Silva. That being said, if he loses to Uriah Hall, that's his worst loss on his resume. I mean, Chris Weidman in 2012, 2013
undefeated.
was undefeated. He was the upper echelon of the division. That Michael Bisping held the title, you know. Daniel Cormier, I think Anderson Silva weighed in at 202 or 203 for that fight and was just outsized. Israel Adesanya, the current GOAT, and Jared Cannonier, which brings the most power in the middleweight division right now. And I think Uriah Hall isn't too far behind Jared Cannonier as far as his power shots that he's able to give. So I don't expect Anderson Silva's body to hold up. I expect Uriah Hall to get this. I wouldn't play him at a minus 219, but the inside the distance at plus 170 and it being a 5-round fight, that's where it's at, man.
It is, man. And this one's an ending that we've been seeing come for quite some time. 2020 we've seen Cejudo, DC, Habib, all of them retire and stuff. That DC had the age and stuff appropriate, but we've seen some guys retire early and stuff. So we've lost some greats here in 2020, man. But this is one we've seen coming for a long time. I told you earlier, I wish they probably would have given him like a Jotko or a Tavares on a co-main spot, something to let him.
Even I talked about Edmund Shabazian, and regardless if Silva wins or not, he's at least handing off the torch to the new era.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this one, it's not a favor for Anderson Silva, even though it is a step down in competition. Man, I like Uriah Hall, and I really like the plus 170 inside the distance.
I think that's the spot to play.
So, man, that recaps the night of fights and stuff. But as always, I know we like to do a fighter and a fight to watch. Obviously, our boy is going to be our fighter, but we put him off limits. So, your fighter to watch on Saturday, who you got, man?
So, my fighter to watch is Justin Ledit. He is my underdog play of the night, and I think that he has all the tools and the size to beat Dustin Jacolby, especially at 3-1 dog odds right here. So, that's my fighter to watch for sure.
And my fighter to watch, man, is Alexander the Great Hernandez. You can argue that after steamrolling the first couple fights in the UFC, that he's on a 3-fight losing streak. The Trinaldo fight was super close. I personally think he lost it. But I think this is a fight that the UFC served him on a silver platter. They said, here's you some guy to knock out in the prelim main event spot live on ESPN. Man, I won't miss this fight on Saturday. I really think we're going to see him come out the gate fast. The new training camp at Factory X Muay Thai. I think we're going to see a new, improved Alex Hernandez. Really, at 28 years old, he's got a long future in that lightweight. Or, like I said, if he drops the featherweight division as well, man.
For sure. So my fight to watch, it's got to be Kevin Holland versus Makhmud Muradov.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be an absolute banger and would be my pick for the performance of the night bonus, just for the both of them. I think that they're going to put on a show for us, and at 185, they're going to be throwing some heat, so I'm looking forward to that.
I kept them off limits for the fighter to watch, but I think Andre Fili and Bryce Mitchell is going to be a really, really good fight, man. Both of these guys are, they bring a really good skill set to the table. You got a guy in Fili who feels like he's getting counted out here and really wants to make a statement. And you got Bryce who really needs to keep the freight train going and everything. So I expect both of these guys to show up the best we've seen them and put on a hell of a fight for us Saturday.
I liked it.
So, man, as always, let us know in the comments who you guys have in the main event. If you got Uriah Hall or Silva, and let us know if you got our boy or Fili there in the co-main event. We'll put you in the run-in for the poster back here. Make sure to follow us on Twitter, and our bets will be posted at betmma.tips, where we're always tracked. Anything else you want to add?
Nope, that's it.
You guys take it easy and hope you're cashing with us.
All right, peace.